guys, I'm here to talk to you about embryonic stem cell research. So, the first question is, what is a stem cell? A stem cell is a cell in the body that does not have a function yet. So it can be used to replace dead old cells. So for example, if you're riding your bike and you fall on your arm and you break your bone, you can use stem cells to repair that bone because these cells don't have a function. So then if you give them a function to be a bone cell or bone marrow, then it can heal the bone. See? Stem cells can be used to help cure cancer, but there's more to come on that later. So, the big question of the day is stem cell research moral? Well, the answer to that question is yes, but no, but mainly yes. So stem cell research, to be specific, adult stem cell research is moral, and the church actually supports it. So, why are we talking about it? It's because embryonic stem cell research is immoral. So what's the difference between adult stem cells and embryonic stem cells? Well, adult stem cells, there's no harm in getting them. They come from umbilical cords, placenta, amniotic fluid, adult tissues, bone marrow, fat from liposuction, regions in the nose, and even cadavers from up to 20 hours after death. Now, embryonic stem cells come from embryos and therefore killing a person. So obviously, that is immoral. But adult stem cells have been used and shown to cure way more than embryonic. Adult stem cells have cured cancers, autoimmune disorders, metabolic disorders, bladder diseases, and more. So, the church's viewpoint. The church obviously opposes embryonic stem cell research because the cells are taken from embryos that are only about 5 days old. If done by other methods, the church fully supports stem cell research. In fact, the United States Conference of Bishops affirmed that the Catholic Church is pro-stem cell research and has even funded projects in Korea as well as Australia. Now to dive deeper into these projects. In 2005, the Catholic Bishops of South Korea donated $10 million to advancing adult stem cell research, and they successfully treated strokes and vascular disease in 64 patients. That's a lot, and way more progress than we get with embryonic. In Australia, a $50,000 grant in Australian dollars was donated for research by the Archdiocese of Sydney, which led to a major breakthrough in demonstrating the capabilities of adult stem cells. Now here is a bulk of what I'm here to talk about, and it's the misconceptions surrounding stem cell research, because there's probably a lot and you probably have a lot of questions, so I hope I can address them. So, the first misconception is that stem cells only come from embryos. That is false. We can get them from the placenta and the nose and cadavers. We talked about that earlier. Number 2, the church is against stem cell research. Nope, just if it involves embryos. 3, embryonic stem cell research shows the most promise. No, as we said earlier, the adult stem cell has cured more diseases and disorders than the embryonic. 4, embryonic stem cell research is against the law. It is not. In fact, President George W. Bush actually gave funding for embryonic stem cell research, and Obama increased these funds again. 5, therapeutic cloning and reproductive cloning are fundamentally different from one another. The only difference is what the embryo is used for. One will be in a womb, and the other will be used for research. but in both cases, an embryo is being made unnaturally, which we'll talk about later, is immoral. 6. Somatic cell nuclear transfer and cloning are different. They're the exact same thing, they just have different names. 7. By doing somatic cell nuclear transfer, we can directly produce tissues or organs without having to clone an embryo. An embryo is produced in this method, as it is the same thing as cloning. But other advances are in fact being made, so eventually this might be a possibility. 8. Every body cell or somatic cell is somehow an embryo and thus human life. This is not the case. Stem cells can produce skin cells, but skin cells cannot produce sex cells. Skin cells can only produce skin cells. So an embryo is not going to come from skin cells. So it can't potentially become a human, and it is not an embryonic stem. Number 9. Because frozen embryos may one day end up being discarded by somebody, that makes it morally allowable to violate and destroy these embryos. Alright, let's take our good friend Captain America, for example. Didn't he freeze? Did that make him less of a human? He was frozen. No. He's still a human. He's still a human person. He still has dignity, and he still has rights. Because you froze the embryo doesn't mean that it's not a person. And that doesn't mean that we can just discard them because of them potentially going bad. 10. Large numbers of embryo generated during marital acts may be lost from a woman's body and die naturally. And that makes it okay for us to create and destroy embryos in research. So, let's have an example here. Let's say there's 2 babies. One of them catches some disease right after birth and dies. That is a natural death, okay? The other case is the mother takes the pillow and smothers the baby until it dies. See, this is the difference between a baby dying in the womb through miscarriage or a stillbirth and an embryo being created for the purpose of being exploited and not being able to live. Finally, embryonic stem cell research are the only useful stem cells left. Well, as we already said, adult stem cells are way more useful than embryonic and have helped much more people. It is harmless, safe, preserves life, and it treats more things. The Donum Vitae explains more why the Church is against embryonic stem cell research. It is because it involves the destruction of human life and it degrades the dignity of each person. And it kind of labels the unborn as a clump of cells, which is like kind of the biggest debate in abortion. So stem cell research is just affirming that it's just a clump of cells, but it's not. It's a human life. So this research is making life worthless, and if we made it illegal, it would help conserve life and prove that embryos are babies. So, if adult stem cells are safer, more effective, morally sound, all of these things, why do people still use embryos? Well, embryonic stem cell research is cheaper than adult stem cell research. And embryos, they can be more varied. So adult stem cells can be made into one specific type of tissue, where embryonic can be made into any. So, my little wrap up on embryonic stem cell research is that all the misconceptions come from people who don't believe that embryos are a human life, and by doing this research we are disposing them, exploiting them, all for personal gains and selfish use. And by making it illegal, I think it would be another step in preserving life and one step closer to getting Roe v. Wade overturned. So now, to Ian.
Hi, my name is Ian Minzner, and I will be continuing the second part of the stem cell research and cloning presentation, along with the church's stance on it. I will be covering what is cloning, why is it bad, and the church's stance on it. I'm going to start off first with what is cloning. Cloning is the copying of another life form. There are two different kinds of cloning. The first kind is reproductive cloning. This is the type of cloning that comes to most people's minds when they hear cloning. This is basically copying another life form and then making it a full organism. And so this type of cloning is illegal in most countries and is being discontinued due to the moral aspects. The other type of cloning is therapeutic cloning. Therapeutic cloning is basically copying stem cells. Stem cells from therapeutic cloning are then given to scientists for medical research so they can look for vaccines and stuff. And this type of cloning is allowed in most countries. The first ever successful type of cloning done was with a sheep named Dolly. Scientists basically took Dolly's DNA, put it into a machine, copied it, and then they successfully made another sheep. This was shocking at the time. However, since then, there have been many moral disputes between scientists and society about whether or not is cloning morally permissible? Should we be doing this? Is this right? And while we do have the technology in order to make another life through cloning, we don't have a moral higher calling from God to do so. And that is one of the reasons why the church does not agree with cloning. Another reason that the church disagrees with cloning is because it is done asexually. That means only one person is creating the new life form, the person whose DNA is being copied. This is going against God's plan for humanity. According to theology of the body, the plan to create new life is to have a man and a woman come together in marriage, and then, as a result of that marriage, to bear a kid. And since cloning goes against God's plan, that means that it is morally impermissible according to the church. Therefore, the church disagrees with it and does not approve of it. The church also doesn't agree with cloning because, according to therapeutic cloning, the stem cells that are then made from the original stem cells are then used in stem cell research, which results in their destruction. The church views these stem cells as living things, so therefore they have the right to life, and destroying them for research is basically going against their right of life. The scientists who use these stem cells in their research are basically treating these living things as objects who are basically okay to just destroy. So since therapeutic cloning is going against God's desire to create life, the church disagrees with it. Basically, the church's final stance is that it goes against cloning, and so does most of society. And basically, they believe that cloning should be discontinued and is overall morally wrong.